Wake up, Mr. Wayne. We have much to discuss.
Batman Arkham City is Rocksteady Studios' follow-up to the acclaimed Arkham Asylum, which set the high watermark for superhero games back in 2009. This time, the scum and villainy can't be contained by just one estate. All manner of assorted punks, felons, and criminal masterminds have been walled off into the slums of Gotham, an area dubbed Arkham City. Bruce Wayne begins his adventure in serious trouble. He's been captured, and his secret identity has been compromised. Everything flows from action to cutscene to QuickTime event so smoothly it's sometimes hard to tell which is which. And from the very beginning, the experience is moody, brutal, and thoroughly enjoyable. Well, maybe not the very beginning. For those who bought the game new, there's downloadable content starring Catwoman. She has 4 missions sprinkled throughout the game, from before the opening titles to after the credits roll. While they are accessible from the main menu, once installed, they're required to complete the story. These missions are just as well made as Batman's, and her fight and traversal mechanics every bit as smooth and detailed, but the overall play experience is not enriched much by their inclusion, and is in fact slightly dulled by these somewhat tonally inconsistent distractions from the main action. The opening, for example, is arguably stronger in the version without Catwoman, and her second mission breaks up one of recent gaming's more compelling first-act developments into a cliffhanger that feels more soap operatic than cinematic. The motto here seems to be more is more. It should come as no surprise that Arkham City has much more explorable area than Arkham Asylum, but there are also more gadgets, more attacks that utilize the cityscape verticality, more villains, and a frightening amount more Riddler content. While out on the town, Batman can also avail himself of the many optional missions that exhibit the same level of polish as the main through-line and are woven expertly into the story, so it doesn't feel too out of place in most cases for Batman to table a previous objective for a few minutes. Combat has depth by way of its complexity, but usually not much challenge. Cleaner execution is rewarded with a handful more experience points and a warm fuzzy feeling, but since encounters are too often just swarms of goons that can be stumbled through, perfecting your skullcracking is more or less its own reward. Those who do enjoy the combat, though, have tons of challenge modes to enjoy, with plenty of prey to terrify and beat senseless. Batman uses gadgets against bosses in more or less the same way as against common thugs, and with similar levels of awesome resulting. There are 1 or 2 exceptions that do require the player to be one with the bat, and demonstrate mastery over the potpourri of technological savagery at hand, but some bosses, such as the one lying in wait within the world's creepiest museum, though tonally and visually heightened, are kinda boring. Most disappointing of all, the most cerebral and open-ended boss in the game, maybe even one of the best bosses in any game, is immediately preceded by a total head-scratcher of a cutscene. After the fight, everything's back to normal just as puzzlingly fast. Arkham City makes the odd choice here and there, from mild contrivance to gaping plot hole, in order to pack in the large cast of characters. That said, these characters' voice acting is solid throughout. Even assorted lackeys give good reads. The esteemed Nolan North strikes a Nathan Drake-like tone when portraying henchmen, but his interpretation of Penguin sports a Cockney accent and diabolical swagger.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Mark Hamill's Joker and Kevin Conroy's Batman also feel pitch perfect, though Mr. Freeze sounds not a thing like Schwarzenegger. Traversal around the city is fun, but sometimes at odds with the relentless drive of the story beats. Even players solely focused on completing the main plot will encounter MMO-like quest objectives, such as interacting with objects scattered around the city. Some of that can feel more like a tactic to stretch out expected playtime than a finely crafted experience like the majority of the indoors material. Arkham City's art is detailed and creates the mood effectively, but doesn't vary quite enough, especially in the first half of the campaign. It's impressive and detailed, but a bit too uniformly bleak, and the 360 version at least suffers from some textures that stream in higher resolution versions slowly or not at all. Arkham City may have lost a little bit of its charm during its evolution into an open world-ish game. But it also polishes and builds upon the already rich experience of Arkham Asylum. Once again, Rocksteady has produced an engrossing, impressive, really fun game that just so happens to feature characters from comic books, not just that backhanded compliment of good for a comic book game. It's the closest we'll get to feeling like Batman till the next game, will probably come up in Game of the Year discussions, and is definitely worth a play through.
So, shall we begin?
Batman Arkham City earns 4 out of 5.